Hey everyone, how's it going? Good, happy Saturday. Thank you for letting me come to your place and teach you a few things about gluten. Now again, gluten is a very, very big word. Okay, I'm sure we've all heard the dangers of gluten, especially nowadays in 2016. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over some of the history of gluten. At one time, believe it or not, it actually was good for you. Okay, we used it back in the beginning of time, back in the hunter-gatherer days, back when old Tobar was trying to fight the dinosaur. We used it back then, but it's only been recent that actually gluten has actually become a toxin for us. And I'm going to go over that. I'm going to go over some gluten-free stuff and information, and you're really going to the take-home message is really a good alternative for gluten. Okay? Does that make sense, everybody? Do I got everybody? Awesome. Good. Okay, so going gluten-free. The why and how of gluten-free diets. Now, before I begin, there's a great book out there called The Paleo Manifesto by John Durant. And also, too, there's a great book out there, Wheat Belly, as well. So I recommend those two resources. If you have any questions, I always refer back to those books. Phenomenal books. Okay? So let's start. So who am I? Who am I? Okay. I graduated from National University of Health Sciences back in 2003. By the way, if you haven't checked out, my name is Dr. Jawad. Okay. 2004, 2006, I worked downtown as associate in a practice. I learned a lot. 2006, I actually opened up my own practice in Carroll Stream, Illinois. I'm kind of smart. I always say I'm kind of smart. Okay. I have a couple fellowships, a couple diplomates underneath my belt. People always ask me, what is a diplomate? Okay, basically a diplomate is the highest degree of education that you get in your chosen field. So I always say I'm kind of smart. I still feel like I'm the dumbest guy in the room, but hey, my initials tell me different. Also too, in 2014, I've always wanted to, and I finally achieved one of my goals, and that's to be a teacher. I'm an adjunct professor over at the College of DuPage. I teach Human Anatomy and Physiology to a lot of up-and-coming healthcare professionals. A lot of youngsters. They keep me on my toes, and I always thought that the greatest gift of giving is giving back. So that's who I am. So on today's agenda, first and foremost, I'm going to explain to you what is gluten, and why do we have gluten sensitivities. Two, how to manage your food, because now once you realize that gluten is bad for you, the biggest question is always what? What do I eat now? What do I eat now? I don't know what to eat anymore because right now all you're telling me is it's poison, right? Okay, where are some helpful resources? And at the end, I know it's that time. It's going to be a quiz. So get your notes out, get your pens out, take some notes. Okay, so gluten and gluten sensitivities first and foremost. So what is gluten? Actually, gluten is a protein. It's a protein composite in many grains and grain-based foods. Now remember, we started off eating grains back in the paleo days, back in the hunter and gatherer days. So what happened along the way? Okay, and I'll tell you what happened along the way. I'll tell you why gluten's so bad. A little bit of history. Yes, I'm going to give you a history lesson. I know, I don't like it either, but hey. Okay, spelt in the Bronze Age, used into modern day grocery stores. So, wheat and its corresponding protein component, gluten. Gluten has been a prevalent component of human meals throughout the ages. Gluten, what is gluten? It's a natural component of most whole grains. And we've been consuming it since we first started cultivating. Back in the hunter and gatherer days, back when Tobar was getting chased from the dinosaur, his lovely bride was out there plowing the fields and, trying to gather the food. Well, not actually plowing the fields. She can't plow the fields. She was actually just picking grains. So, gluten. What is gluten? It's a Latin word that actually means glue. Gluten. Gluten is actually on, when you lick a stamp, or when you lick an envelope, that's actually gluten on the envelope in of itself. So before your mind just goes absolutely ballistic, we have gluten every single day. We're tasting it. It's out there. But I'm just going to educate you a little bit more about what it's all about. Due to its ability to hold grains like wheat, barley, and rye together, again, it's in pasta, bread, and other wheat products, it gives it their chewy and flexible texture. Okay, gluten, at first it seems harmless and natural enough, but to 133 Americans, about 1% of the population, Gluten can cause a lot of symptoms, and this is called gluten sensitivity. It can cause, again, headache, nausea, skin rashes, chronic fatigue, and even depression. Diarrhea, bloating. Okay, so let me just give you a little bit of a history lesson. Way back in the Bronze Age, way back in the hunter-gatherer days. This is 3000 BC to 1200 BC to medieval times. Basically, I always say to the Lord of the Ring times, or Game of Thrones. So, during the Bronze Age, spelt. What is spelt? It's a species of wheat spread through Central Europe, becoming a staple in people's diets. So, spelt was introduced to Switzerland, Tyrol, and Germany during the Middle Ages, containing gluten, a good amount of protein, fiber, carbs, vitamins, and minerals. Spelt was a hearty food for peasants during this time. But today it's become something of a specialty health food. So, moving forward, 15th century, discovery, the age of discovery. The French, the English, and the Portuguese explorers brought wheat and other grains to North and South America, which had previously only been cultivated in the Old World. So now we're looking through the age of agriculture, the Industrial Revolution. What wheat and gluten allowed people to do was to feed the masses. Back in the paleo days, the hunter and gatherer days, they ate what they killed that day. So if you think about that logically, food was very limited. But now you have grain. Grain allowed people to store food. Okay? And that was the age of agriculture. Now, going through the Industrial Revolution, fast forward now to the 19th century, swept through the Western world in the 18th and 19th centuries, and it sped up the process of bread making significantly. Now again, I come back to this point always time and time again. Gluten is not bad for you back in the days. Okay, back in the days, I'm going to go through this. As a result, wheat, which had been previously available only to a small number of people, now became a far more widespread. You're feeding families with bread and gluten and wheat and barley. So now, let me just take a step here. The Bronze Age, 19th century, all the way up to 1992. Now 1992 is a pivotal time in wheat and gluten history. Why is that? Just think about that point. Why? 1992 changed how the industry produced wheat and gluten. What happened? The original American Food Guide pyramid, created by the U.S. Department of Agriculture in 1992, listed whole grains as one of the most important food groups. Now it's the most important food group, the food chain pyramid, stating that one should eat at least 6 to 11 servings of whole grains a day. That's 6 to 11 servings of whole grain per day. What other product do they recommend 6 to 11 servings? Vegetables, fruits, now it's grains. Let me ask you something. Okay, for now again, I'm talking to the people who are old, to the older people in the group, over 45, like me. When did obesity in America become a problem? Not back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, no. I look back at all the old TV shows, and you see all these, they're young, fit people. Post 1992, that is a pivotal stamp of when obesity in America actually started on its rise. Why? Is that, you gotta think to yourself, what happened? What happened to that time period? This further solidified the prevalence of wheat and other grains in the American diet. Around this time also, celiac disease. Hold on. Just hold on for a question. I was going to ask for a question. Celiac disease began to rear its ugly head. And I'll get to celiac disease in a second. So some research believe that this increase in grain consumption is parallel to the rise in gluten intolerance. Let's fast forward again, but slowly. Now it's the 2000s. Due to crossbreeding, this is why gluten is so bad. Okay? Again, gluten is bad. Very bad. Because now it's 2000. Due to crossbreeding over many years, modern wheat consumption went through a transformation. When you crossbreed stuff, it's kind of like making a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. What is the best copy? It's the first copy. But when you run things through a copy machine, and now you're making the copy of the copy of the copy of the copy, and so forth and so on, what happens to the 1000th copy? It's not as clear as the original, correct? Crossbreeding. It's about 2 feet tall with large seeds. Whereas before it was much taller. Now it's shorter and thicker. Where before it was taller and thinner. Now if you look at modern day America, doesn't that tell you the same situation? So the gluten structure in modern wheat has also changed somewhat, though its essence is still gluten, and the modern wheat also contains a higher level of the starch amylopectin A. Okay, what that is, it's a soluble polysaccharide and highly branched polymer of glucose found in plants. It's one of the two components of starch, the other one being amylose. So, okay, now let's take it to 2011. Now again, the Bronze Age, Industrial Age, 1992, 2000, now 2011. You see how fast things change once post-1992 happened? 2011, cardiologist Dr. William Davis published a book, Wheat Belly. Now I always recommend 2 books, Wheat Belly, also, Grain Brain, that's another one too. And also the Paleo Manifesto. The Paleo Manifesto is John Duran, phenomenal book. It will go back into the dawn of time to modern day as well. So I recommend that book. I highly recommend that book. But what happened, again, grains and gluten can make some people feel sick, he argues, and the type of grains that we eat today have been so altered and modified over the years that they're no longer what they used to be. Gluten, yes, it's a protein. It's a protein. For the people over 45, I always kind of bring that one about. It makes sense. Because we remember when wheat bread was actually, in 1982, what was the advertisement to eat wheat bread? It was protein enriched. Remember those days? Yeah, remember that? It was protein enriched bread. What did they do? They took away the fiber in the bread, and they replaced it with gluten. Why did they do that? I'll tell you why. Because when you have gluten as this foreign substance in a bread product, what that did, that extended the shelf life. Think about this back in the days. My father, he was a cardiologist too, and he always used to say, eat your fiber. Eat your fiber. What does fiber do? It helps push food along. But also too, if you notice nowadays, what are a lot of commercials about? Fiber. Because what happens when you leave the fiber in the bread? It shortens the shelf life. One of our biggest import-export commodities besides coffee, bread products. So it extends the shelf life of the bread. The problem is, the human body is very dynamic because we always want to return to natural. Remember 20, 30 years ago, margarine? Margarine was good for us. Now we realize margarine is bad for us. Okay? The body always wants to go back to the natural state. The problem is, it's been so altered and modified over the years that they no longer what they used to be. That's why we're getting a lot of what's called gluten sensitivities. So wheat belly contributed to the anti-gluten wave that prevented many regular people to avoid bread, pasta, and cereal, even when they had no visible gluten sensitivity. So, buzzword. We've heard this buzzword before. I talk about this buzzword a lot to my patients, to my students, to people, okay? They get so tired of it. Gluten sensitivity, what is it? So when a person's immune system reacts abnormally to gluten, it's called the gluten sensitivity. Celiac disease is a gluten sensitivity. So what happens when you get gluten sensitivity? You have abdominal pain, you get bloated, constipation and or diarrhea, fatty, noxious, floating, bloody, and otherwise stools. Again, when you have a bowel movement, it should be fast, something to brag about, and it should go right down the toilet. What happens now, because the body has a hard time digesting it, it floats. Hence the name poop floats. Nausea and or vomiting and a reduced appetite. Now, some people say, well, how do I know what symptoms I have? I always say, you know what, when you're having that bread, or the Olive Garden's big, not that I'm slamming the Olive Garden to the people watching this on YouTube, okay? I used to love Olive Garden. When you're eating bread, or a bread product, or pasta, or gluten, when you start to actually have to loosen your belt, okay? Or what's going on is that you start to create the sweat. That's a gluten sign. Or what happens, you get the 3 o'clock blues after lunch. You start to what? Fall asleep. Not because you had a nice hearty chicken sandwich over at a restaurant. No, it's because what's happening, your body's creating a reaction, a sensitivity to gluten, and that's the reaction. It's immune response. So additional symptoms, yes, seizures. I had a patient of mine, she had frequent seizures due to the fact that she was constantly eating gluten and gluten products. Okay, once she stopped that, she was fine. Now again, gluten's in a lot of products, so she did a lot of her homework. Numbness in hands or feet, nosebleeds, yes. Muscle cramps, joint pain, itchy skin, hair loss, fatigue, anxiety or depression. Question?
So what is celiac disease?
Okay, gentleman in front asked, what is celiac disease? Now again, here's the thing. Here's the thing about celiac disease, okay? Celiac disease is a pathology, okay? But before a pathology occurs, dysfunction has to happen, okay? I always tell it's kind of like this, okay? Before the leaky pipe bursts, before that pipe burst, it had a leak. Celiac disease is the end result of a continuous annihilation of your immune system, okay? And that's a great question. People always ask me that a lot. People always ask me, well, why should I avoid gluten if I'm not celiac? It makes sense. What's wrong with my, it makes sense. So celiac disease is a condition in which the parts of the small intestines are damaged in immune reaction to gluten. Remember, the body does not like gluten. It's a foreign substance. The body doesn't like it. So normally the body's immune system is designed to protect it from foreign invaders. So in people with celiac disease, eat foods containing gluten, their immune system forms antibodies to gluten, which then attack the intestinal lining. Your body's literally attacking its own self. Literally, I tell you what's going on. What's happened is actually it punches holes. It punches holes in the intestinal lining. So your immune system is right, again, it's part of your digestive system. It's right next to it. It's called the lymphatic system, but don't worry about that. What happens is that the gluten, because your body can't digest it, literally when it's going through your digestive process, it's punching holes in the small intestines, which, what happens then, your body forms antibodies to it, and this causes inflammation of the intestines and damages the villi. Now, the villi, for the people who don't know, villi are like little finger-like projections that align the small intestines. The hair-like structures are lining, and nutrients from the food are normally absorbed by the villi. So what happens, you gotta think about this, if it's damaged, if your pipe is damaged, it's going to leak. Eventually, once it leaks, it's going to what? Burst. So the person can absorb nutrients properly and ends up malnourished, no matter how much he or she eats. So normally the body's immune system is designed to protect it from foreign invaders. So what happens with celiacs? It contains gluten, their immune system forms antibodies antibodies to gluten, which attacks the small intestinal lining, cause inflammation. So what happens again? It pokes holes in the small intestines, which creates a condition called leaky gut. So why intestinal damage? Because the villi of the lining of the small intestine, it helps absorb nutrients. Surprising celiac stats. Again, a lot of people don't realize they have it. And that's a scary thing. So 30 to 40% of all people in the US carry the gene for celiac disease. And only 1 or 2% of those people have the gene activated. Now again, you gotta question yourself this. Ask this question, how do you activate a gene in your body? You eat it typically by eating bad foods. So surprising stats, activating the gene for celiac disease is usually the result of an environmental trigger. Okay, either, again, there's numerous ways, getting a parasite, getting sick. Stress is a huge way to do it. Right now in the 21st century, we are stress driven. Taking certain medications, A lot of my patients, when they're on certain anti-acid medications, what happens, or antibiotics, antibiotics cleans your the intestinal lining. It's kind of like having a fish tank. You guys had fish before, right? Yes, growing up? Okay. Okay. So what happens when you have a fish tank and you put the fish in and it's too clean? The fish die. Now again, your intestinal system has to be a certain pH. So if the intestinal lining is too clean, it causes a pathology. So how's it diagnosed? Okay, so if you have celiac disease, how's it diagnosed? First with a blood test, then with a biopsy. So they actually have to take a little piece of the lining, they look at it under a little tiny microscope, and they say, congratulations, you have celiac disease. Okay. But I know, it's tough, man. It's tough. I have patients who have celiac disease. It is not fun to have, okay? It's hard to get a celiac diagnosis because the symptoms are the same as many other conditions. And so every person diagnosed with celiac, 80 may be going undiagnosed. Okay, now we're back from the bathroom break. Hopefully nobody went out there and had a chicken sandwich or some gluten, so I'll definitely keep you guys awake, okay? So, I know, it's tough. It's tough. Approximately 3 million people in the United States have celiac disease, okay? So the average time a person waits before being diagnosed with celiac disease is 6 to 10 years. That's a long time to be suffering from a lot of symptoms to find out that you finally have celiac disease. Now again, remember, celiac disease, what is that? It's the pathology. Basically, do you guys know what pathology is? A pathology is the end result of something dysfunctional, okay? So before the celiac disease is diagnosed, there has to be some type of dysfunction. Remember, the pipe has to leak before it busts. So imagine having a leaky pipe, which is virtually leaky gut, for 6 to 10 years, and then now your pipe bursts, now you got celiac disease. I know, it's tough. So 3 million people have celiac disease. 18 million people have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So, what's the cure? Good question. No gluten. No gluten, gluten-free. Or I always say, you know, it's hard to be, it's really hard, and again, I'm human too, it's hard to be gluten totally free because gluten's in everything. I licked a stamp today, I sent a letter to my girl, and I had gluten. All right, I licked the envelope, I have gluten. So again, it's very, very hard to be gluten-free because gluten is in every product out there. Salad dressings, loaded with gluten. So if you have celiac disease, the only treatment, though, is to go 100% gluten-free. Again, pathology. So, we call it getting gluten. Diarrhea, faintiness, fever, itching, rash, hives, nausea, stomach pain, vomiting. This is all stuff that you think is natural on a day-by-day basis, and it's not. You shouldn't have all this stuff, especially after you eat some foods. You should, idealistically, back in the days, for the people over 50 years old, okay, you remember have a nice breakfast, have a nice lunch, and have a nice dinner, and not feeling tired, right? Yes, over there, I remember, yes, you did. You and I talked at lunchtime, yes, I remember. What happened when you had your lunch back when you were younger? You went back to work fully energized. You said that, correct? So, yes, two questions. All right.
I'm just curious, what are the symptoms for celiac disease?
Okay, good question. Gentleman in front, he asked, what are the symptoms of celiac disease? Now remember, before you diagnose a celiac disease, you have a gluten sensitivity. So those symptoms typically overlap each other. Okay, again, you ignore the leaky pipe, it's going to burst. So the symptoms of, you first have to be gluten sensitive, and then the end result is celiac. Because remember, when you're taking in gluten, what does that do to the intestinal lining? It punches holes in the intestinal lining. That causes leaky gut. Okay? You have enough, and think about what your small intestines is doing. That's fecal matter. Okay? That's fecal matter. You're literally having fecal matter going into the visceral area, which is causing all this stuff. Okay? You're literally having your poop go back into your body in the wrong direction. Okay? Your poop should go outwards, not back in your body. So yeah, that's a great question. It does mimic celiac disease, but again, celiac disease is the end product. Yes?
My question is, how long does it take if you go completely gluten-free for those people that have celiac? How long does it take for them to actually feel different, not feel these symptoms?
Okay, great question. If you take away, okay, so you're asking how long is it going to be to experience a change, correct? Okay. Physically, great question. Okay, here's the thing about gluten. Okay, we have opiate receptors in our brain. Okay, the opiate receptors they work two ways. One, to tell the brain that you're in pain, but also two, the natural pain suppressants. Okay, what happens when you take like a narcotic, like Vicodin or Norco? Okay, those are opiates. What happens is that your brain gets addicted to it. Okay, when you're eating gluten, that's how they loop you, because it stimulates the opiate receptors in your brain. So what happens when you're sick and you remove the gluten from your diet? What happens when you stop giving the junkie, junk? Okay, whether it be sugar, whether it be narcotics, whether it be anything, they crave it. Okay, they crave it. Your body is literally craving the drug, the gluten, because it stimulates the opiate receptors in the brain. So what's going to happen? You're going to get withdrawal effects. You're going to literally crave gluten. You're going to crave that bread. And that's why you want to go back for it. That's why it's very, very hard to eliminate all gluten from your diet. Because what they did is that, now again, conspiracy theory, I'm a very big conspiracy person. They want to keep you sick. So, if you remove the gluten from the diet, what happens with the opiate receptors? It starts screaming. You will get withdrawal effects. You'll get diarrhea, fainting, fever, itchy hives, nausea, stomach pain, and vomiting. And that's all the withdrawal effects. Now, if you could bear with it for 21 days, again, it takes 21 days to make a habit. So if you eliminate gluten from the diet, you are going to go through withdrawal effects. Idealistically, 10 days is not going to be your friend at all. Okay, but by day 21, you're going to see the light. And so to answer that question, how long it's going to take, I always say give yourself 30 days. 30 days may seem like a long time. However, after about day 21, you're not even going to crave it anymore. By day 30, it's going to be a lifestyle. And I always tell my patients and people this: if you ever want to see how bad gluten is to you, on day 32, go out to a restaurant and have a boatload of gluten and see how you feel. Does that answer the question? Okay. All right. So, gluten sensitivities in food. What to eat, foods to avoid. Barley, beer. What's beer? What's beer? Beer is barley and hops. Bread, cereal. Cereal's horrible for you. Couscous, flour, pasta, rye, spelt. Now remember in the beginning, spelt was big, but now again, with cross-contamination, spelt's bad, very bad. Foods to avoid: gram flour, malt liquor, beer, modified food starch. Start reading labels: soy sauce, vegetable protein, horrific. Other things to avoid: certain cosmetics. Okay, I have a patient of mine. She's very sensitive. She has a bad brain. Actually, it's a dysfunctional brain. She's a very smart woman. However, it's like her brain is not working at 100%. What happened? She did a lot of research on cosmetics. Cosmetics are loaded with foreign ingredients that the body doesn't like. Particular lipsticks, a variety of shampoos, sometimes even soaps, loaded. Certain medications, rubber or latex gloves. What do? Stamp an envelope. I had my gluten today. So what are some options? People always ask, okay, I know what I can't eat, but what can I eat? Now, here, the good thing about going gluten-free is you actually become very imaginative with your food options and food choices. So you can have beans, buckwheat, fish, fruit, meat, nuts. Nuts, almonds and walnuts and cashews are the cleanest nut out there. Peanuts, horrible. The peanut's actually one of the dirtiest nuts. Poultry, quinoa, rice, seeds, tofu, and vegetables. Some alternative. Tons of products these days are being made completely gluten-free, so that's the good news. Check out some new gluten-free breads, cereals, flours, pastas, and more. Oats. The thing about oats, very important about oats, they do not contain gluten. However, you want to make sure when you go to the health food store or Whole Foods or Trader Joe's, read the labels. Make sure there's no other cross ingredients in there that can cause cross-contamination. They're often processed on machines that process foods that do contain gluten. When you go to a restaurant, if you're looking for a gluten-free, make sure, very, very important, be that customer. You gotta be that person. Make sure they're not making the gluten-free food on the same pan that they use to make the gluten-free food, the gluten food. Make sure they're using a different pan altogether, because again, it has a residue. Most important, check labels carefully. Become a label expert, I always say. Gluten-free home. Okay, avoid cross-contamination. Clean anything that might have touched gluten and clean it with soap and hot water. Get your cooking supplies and keep them separate. Because again, cross-contamination, that's the one thing that you want to avoid at all costs. So here's here's a simple meal plan. Again, I just threw this slide in here for some people who are confused. Again, what to eat, what not to eat. Stay away from a lot of stuff that you've been eating originally. So here are some fresh fruit with non-fat, plain yogurt. Gluten-free, like a gluten-free protein powder, and raw sunflower seeds, or if you like almonds are always good. Lunch, a large green salad topped with gluten-free dressing, and a grilled chicken breast, and a cup of vegetable rice soup on the side. Again, these are just alternatives. Some snacks, I'm a big snacker. I snack in between meals, but when I do, I have a medium apple with a tablespoon or two of almond butter. Remember, peanuts are the worst nut for you. They're very, we have a lot of sensitivities to them. Again, back in the days, they were fine. But now we're looking at 21st centuries, okay? The peanuts that they can't sell on the market, they crunch up and they throw it in peanut butter. Think about this. If you gotta think about this logically, peanut butter, a can of peanut butter of Jiffy is like $2 or $3, okay? A jar of almond butter is about anywhere from $10 to $12. You're gonna spend a little bit more money. However, what you're doing is you're paying for the quality of food that you put in your body. Again, this is not, it's not cheaper in this way, but your body's gonna benefit. Dinner. Center on sunset quinoa salad and a chicken breast. Again, these are just examples of foods to eat. There's a lot of books out there. Gluten-free dining. First and foremost, do your homework. There's an app on your cell phone. I forgot what the app is called. It's Dining Gluten-Free or something like that. Dining Gluten-Free. You could find the gluten-free restaurants in your area if you get this app. It's a free app. It'll benefit you in the long run. Have your questions ready, and ask you if it's risky, then don't go. Okay? I know Olive Garden is a great place to go. Pizza's a great place to go. However, you got to question one thing: your health, the benefit to risk ratio. Okay? How important is your health? I always ask my patients, and I always ask anybody, how important is your health to you? The stakes are high, I know. It seems like a lot of fuss. Again, what you want to avoid is getting gluten. Because, again, remember, gluten will damage your intestines every single time. Every single time, regardless of whether other symptoms are present. So each time you have gluten, it's going to cause some damage. Because remember, it's a foreign substance that the body does not like. Okay, so each and every time you have gluten, you're doing damage to the intestinal lining. So only 46% of people with gluten sensitivities achieve mucosal recovery. Yes?
So, under the assumption that celiac disease does not go away, that's genetic, does gluten sensitivity go away if you clean up your diet for a certain amount of time, or does that never go away either?
Good question. Will the gluten sensitivity go away? Again, no. Because, again, gluten is a foreign substance. So you may take it away for a long period of time, okay, and get rid of the symptoms, but the moment you have gluten, remember, it's a foreign substance. Your body doesn't like it. So in actuality, if you take it away, your body's going to love you for it, And then if and when you introduce gluten back into your diet, what's going to happen? Sweating, bloating, gas, constipation, diarrhea. Yeah, so it never goes away because again, the body doesn't want foreign stuff. Good question. Okay, so again, some resources that I get again. You can always, National Foundation of Celiac Awareness, Gluten Intolerance Group, Celiac Disease Foundation, Celiac Sprue Association. These are just some resources and foundations that if you want to further dive into, further research. Again, I always recommend Weak Belly is good. The Paleo Manifesto is good from John Durant. Grain Brain is good from I can never pronounce the guy's last name, Podemar or something like that, Perdier or something like that. So yeah, those are the three references that I always recommend. And also too, Google has a lot more to offer just by looking. So some resources here. So quick quiz. Damn it, quiz. Yes. All right, so gluten is a protein composite found in where? Meat, grains, dairy, vegetable. Also too, true or false, the gene that triggers celiac can be activated at any time. How many said, again, grains and true? Yes. Okay. Gluten is a protein composite found in grains. Also, the gene that triggers celiac disease can be activated at any time. It is true. That's why, if again, there's the young lady in front, if you take it away, if you bring it back, oh yes, you will have a reaction. Symptoms of gluten sensitivity include depression, hives, abdominal pain, all of the above. True or false, celiac disease involves damage to the small intestines whenever gluten is consumed. How many people said all of the above and true? Yes, good answers. You guys are smart. The cure for gluten sensitivities is non-existent, a supplement, pharmaceutical, rare and costly. True or false, 1 to 2% of people in the United States carry the gene for celiacs. Exactly, it's non-existent. There is no cure, just removal. And false, 1 to 2% of all people in the United States carry the gene for celiacs. It's false. We don't all carry it. So, which of the following grains contains gluten? And true or false, beer contains gluten. Barley and true. Yes. In theory, the reason why we feel intoxicated when we have beer, as a matter of fact, is because we're having a gluten reaction to the barley and the wheat. Okay? I have a patient of mine, he's having severe ringing in the ears, and he likes his 3 beers every night after work. Okay? Once he eliminated the beer, the ringing in the ears remarkably went away. Okay? I mean, that's not a cure for the ringing in the ears, but it was a cure for him. Okay, so, all right, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I think this is the end of it. Yeah, so, thank you. Thank you very much.